Those are all new lots for houses to be built by this rapid roofing procedure. There were some 14,000 houses built this way in 20 new towns by people who originally lived in these miserable little mud and thatch villages, which were doomed by the enormous hydroelectric reservoir, which would flood thousands of square miles inland. Now, the big problem was some 100,000 population, more or less, was living along these rivers and channels. And we had only 18 months in which to remove them somehow to new housing and new farms. So the principle of roofs first is to be able to rapidly and at lowest cost get shelter. And this shelter then has the capacity for families to move in and gradually fill in their walls. See, this is the formula that's suitable for resettlement. And there are so many cases of either planned or emergency resettlement. They don't have time for a slow process of building up from foundations and traditional walls and then wait until they can afford a roof. No. The roof first process builds the roofs first for them. So the Ministry of Agriculture led the way by selecting the best potential agricultural areas, and we built towns in the middle of each agricultural area. And we built those towns by putting roofs up first on concrete posts. Some 14,000 such roofs were put up rapidly by small crews. The traditional chief system was perfect for this because they have a work program that everybody gets organized, and the chief directs all this work on the walls and floors. But the roofs are standing, and you've already got a couple of thousand people in there under open roofs. And the resettlers could move in there directly on schedule and build their own walls. A hyperbolic paraboloid, or HYPAR so-called, has a compression arch this way, and it has a tension arch this way, back to back, and they reinforce each other. That's why it's so efficient, because any load, live load, snow load on the compression arch is resisted throughout and is supplemented by the arch, the tension arch. When you're building it, it is all done at one time. You create that whole form in one shot by the frame. The frame is not level. The frame is a warped square. This is latex modified concrete. Latex being the basic element in paint, for instance, so you had that kind of resilience in concrete. These roofs have been tested by the National Park Service and by the Knott Laboratory here in Denver, and they have tested all the way from double the normal roof requirement up to 4 times. And that makes it possible then to have a good roof system which has resilience for hot and cold. This is all that's needed. That thickness is sufficient to park a truck on it. This is typical 1 centimeter thickness. It has a core, reinforcement core, of fiberglass screen. That's what was put across the open frame first, and then the cement was simply poured on there as thin slurry of latex modified concrete, sand, cement, and latex and water. It can be done just by 1 unit at a time, on the spot, in the open, no factory, no forms, or it can be done in a construction yard if you had to put up dozens of houses for a resettlement plan. You would build these lampshades in the yard, temporary construction yard. See, and then you would go out in the field and create the whole community at once. Well, they're as cheap as any other roof. In fact, cheaper than conventional built-up truss-supported metal roofs. Because if you count the cost of all of that substructure that's necessary for conventional roofs and the wall structure to hold all of it, these thin shell, light, portable roofs beat those costs and weights. Our costs, for instance, for materials only, would run from $1 up to $3 a square foot. This process actually is just, you might say, the result of a lot of planning projects in which you had to do rapid relocation of population. Whether, for instance, I've worked on 2 earthquake jobs. The roofing problem seemed to be the first stage. In one case, one earthquake, Managua, Nicaragua, we used all scrap lumber from the earthquake to put up the first 11,000 housing units. This is half of one of those complete lampshades that I call a total high-power roof. When half of this is completed, it's just matched against its other half, and you can transport these through any narrow lanes. This, for instance, 10 feet or 12 feet by 24 feet, and you can get that through anywhere. It's relatively light. It can be handled with manpower on any kind of wheels. You can pull it with any kind of devices. It's so relatively light. When the two halves are put together, it completes that building.